Welcome, everyone. I'm Shah. This is the Data Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about cold outreach for AI and data consultants. And joining me for this discussion is Manny, who runs Terra Bullion, which is a data consultancy doing about 600,000 a year in client engagements. Manny, thank you so much for coming on and giving away all your secrets for cold outreach.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me, Shaw.
Well, I want to start with the most basic question because I feel like a lot of technical people, maybe they start doing consulting or they're doing it as a side gig, and they are completely ignorant of these very fundamental business concepts like cold outreach or landing pages or copywriting. So, just a level set here, what is cold outreach?
Just to put it in plain terms, cold outreach is a way of communicating whatever value proposition that you're presenting to a potential customer that has no clue about you. So, you're making an awareness, and, that could be done in several different ways in today's world.
So basically, you're telling someone about your services who has no idea who you are, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so like what are the some of the different flavors? Because like the first thing that comes to mind for me is just DMing people on LinkedIn or maybe some of the emails I get, like random emails I get in my inbox. Is that basically what we're talking about here, or is there more to it?
From my perspective, there's definitely more, right? Your traditional way is your typical emails or direct messaging through platforms, or, the old school traditional way, you're just calling people directly. But, I like to add the sauce of, like, taking it to a different step of, like, if you go to conventions and your aim is to talk to 100 people and see, just let them know about your services, X, Y, and Z. Or, if you even have the funds for it, actually buying a booth to bring awareness. These are all like cold outreach ways. And, if you're like me, that's an extrovert, I will go to any place and anywhere and talk about data and, kind of lead into the services that I provide as a cold outreach.
So even sushi restaurants, as you were just mentioning
Yep.
offline.
Yep. Even the sushi restaurant.
I'm curious on like the kind of main ways that you're doing this right now. So you didn't mention the sushi restaurant earlier, but like what is the main way you're getting clients? Is it still cold outreach? What's your main acquisition channel right now?
It's still there because, you got to think about it. We're in a digital age to where you could automate a lot of these outreach and still add flavor, depending on how your segmentation is and, who your audience is. You do it at such a large scale with these, at least with the system I've built. You got like your autonomous email senders, AI to enrich certain conversations, but, you don't want it to sound too robotic. But still, in my own opinion, like you cast the biggest net out into the ocean, you're guaranteed to come back with at least 10, 15 fishes, right?
Okay, that's awesome. So the name of the game is volume. You want to reach
Yeah.
out to as many people as possible. You mentioned persona. So there is probably some, you're not just like randomly emailing people, you're trying to get a certain type of customer. So I'm curious, like, how do you know where to cast out that net? So it is going to be a big net, but how do you know where to throw it?
I like to, industry standard, you call it like your ICP, which is like your ideal client profile. If you've ever worked in an organization that you're trying to provide services for, if you paid attention beyond just your typical scope of work, you kind of start seeing where these decisions are being made. So, it could be like the person that you're servicing a project for, the higher up was a VP of marketing or a VP of sales or a director. And sometimes, your CFOs or something of that nature. But I kind of use that to gauge my beginner, at least, approach to like what kind of people I want to reach out to, who are these true decision makers, or who can I contact at a low level that has a direct route to the end decision maker. So just understanding that, and again, with where I assume everyone in here is, focusing on data services, you'd say. So when I went to certain conferences, whether I was the one speaking at them or I was just an attendee, I definitely always looked at who I would say I paid for access to be able to get the profiles of people, and not just from saying I want to contact them, but just understanding like at volume, doing my own, call it a personal project, but that was an analysis that I used to understand like what these ideal people who are very interested in these potential services or products look like. And then from there, I kind of like started structuring my own kind of where do I want to fish and throw my net to.
Okay, that's super interesting. So the obvious place to start is decision makers. So this is going to be like
Yeah.
senior leaders, directors, VPs, even C-suite people for certain organizations. But through going to conferences and talking to people and paying for certain, access for profiles, you've started to refine that. So what does that look like these days? Like who is the ideal customer profile for you?
For me, still definitely on the VP side. Most organizations have kind of moved into where they hire from up and then they start to build downward. And that just is a recipe of like, hey, they're looking to fill roles in there, but they have direct needs. So they're going to be willing to, look for third party solutions. And, that usually falls within the call of like a VP of strategy realistically. So they kind of get to choose like, hey, what infrastructure should I bring, or should I hire a director of data analysis or data engineering X, Y, and Z? So they would kind of be your go-to person. I've seen in a lot of cases where the head of data science or head of data analytics or visualization, whatever the case may be, they report to the VP of strategy or something of that nature. So that's kind of like, what I've kind of seen training. Now, that doesn't mean that that's always the case. So you kind of just gotta, try different individuals here and there. But that'll kind of be like my number one.
So the ideal customer would be this VP of strategy, but it's obviously you're going to reach out to other people who have
Yeah,
similar job titles to them. Is it a
exactly.
specific org or particular industry? Are there any other filters that you apply to? I imagine
Yeah,
just like VP level, but is there anything else?
I would like to say whatever way you could even just enrich it. So even though let's say you got like a whole list of VP of strategists, right? If you could definitely go on LinkedIn and be able to like start looking at, did they engage in certain data posts or AI posts, whatever the case that's trending, right? And work your way through that to say, okay, this is someone that's most likely interested. They're not the technical individuals to do it, but they're, obviously have that interest and probably having their company in mind to be able to adopt stuff like this. So kind of if you want to reverse engineer it, is like let's say you made a post in regards to data and you look through the people that liked it or whatever, and you saw like a VP of X, Y, and Z. That's like a way to say, okay, this persona kind of matches, and let me look for this. What industry are they in? And maybe they probably have certain connections. So a lot of like, I don't say there's just one direct funnel. Like I like to kind of go from all directions. So from upward, downward, left or right. Just at the end of the day, trying to like get it to make sense.
It sounds like you have this baseline of this VP of strategy, but then it's like a lot of more manual work to refine it even further. So reviewing LinkedIn posts, looking at Upwork jobs and things like that, talking to people at conferences, it's kind of getting into the weeds that allows you to add additional filters and refine that profile even
Yeah,
more.
yeah, 100%. And I'm a technical individual, and when I say that, what that means is that I would actually get my hands dirty. So if you think about this, all this stuff that is going on is pretty much data collection, right? So from taking notes of all the emails and profiles from all these conferences, maybe recording transcripts to kind of like summarize all of them and create that profile for them. You pull from LinkedIn and you're able to kind of like reverse engineer, like build a scraper, kind of say, okay, like what was the last 5 posts or whatever that they've engaged in. All these things could be manual work for people that don't want to either pay for tools or don't have the skill sets to build the tools themselves. But for me, I kind of just meshed my non-technical skills and my technical skills to kind of make that easier for me.
I want to go back to earlier where you mentioned you have like this whole system for taking the prospect and kind of passing them through this funnel. So it's like the outreach at a high level. Like, what are all the key steps from you have someone's contact info on a list, and then what is everything happening to hopefully turn them into an actual client?
The first place is, the messaging, how you deliver the message. And this is directly in terms of whether it's DMs or emails that you're sending, right? In my case, I have a system to where, I would do a mass outreach and I'll look at the data. So you have your typical metrics like open rate, engagement rate, depending on the tool that you use. You could get a bit more sophisticated with really, you'd say event tracking.
So is
And
this email or LinkedIn?
uh, email and also LinkedIn. So I'm looking at, but I kind of just consider all of them direct messaging, you'd say. But that being said, looking at how with email you kind of get to play around because you could put templates in there and kind of put event tracking, create like heat maps. If you didn't go the traditional way of just sending text, taking your time to actually embed you could say a landing page in your email. Kind of get to see like, where people hover around the most. So obviously call to action button usually is the one. So you kind of see like, was that email even effective in the first place versus maybe the second or third version that you put out there? Was your call to action button like, accessible with ease? And the way you kind of see that is you can have a whole high engagement rate, but if you're able to track all this kind of data, you'll be able to see, okay, like even my messaging, is it as clean as possible to direct the user to kind of like get to the next level of just, setting up a 30-minute meeting or whatever.
So you'll send the email or a
hmm
LinkedIn DM, and then you have tools that will allow you to track these various event metrics. What are some of those tools, like for the
Well,
heat maps and things like that? That sounds, I've never heard of that for email stuff.
so you would have obviously your typical could be Apollo or Smart Lead. Those are like your all-in-one tools. Another favorite one of mine is you could pretty much create. I just like to call it landing page. The person that helped me set it up called it something else, but a landing page that's just embedded in your email, and through that we embedded like event tracking through Google Analytics in there. A bit costly, but was definitely useful, and I think will continue to be useful in the future once you learn how to do it by yourself. But those are more of like the sophisticated levels that you could definitely go into.
Okay, that's cool. So your email is actually HTML, and that
Yep,
allows you to do the event tracking. And so
yep.
what's the call to action? Is it book a call, like just from that
But
first email? Are you including
yes,
like freebies, like a slide deck? Are you including any information for them to learn more?
yeah, of course. I always put in my brochure. You could say, from who we are, what we do, past wins or testimonials, you'd say, is usually what that entails. And hopefully it's convincing enough. I don't see ever converting right then and there into potential buying of my product. This is also very important outside of even just getting the leads, closing the leads with personality and just personalization in there plays a big role. So, they get to talk to you, they get to actually see what kind of person you are, what solutions you could bring, and how to make them even think more beyond what they're even asking for, or something of that nature. You kind of build that relationship. So, I always see where that 15, 30-minute conversation would actually be the true game changer on what your conversion would look like.
So I think I've got the big picture now. So first step is you create your ideal customer profile,
Yeah.
and then you use that to create this lead list. And then you send out, let's just say, emails to keep it simple. And then for your emails, it's actually an HTML thing. So you can do the event tracking. And then in that email, you're also including a lot of information about who the company is, what you guys do, past projects. And the call to action for that email is book a call. And then when you get on that call,
Your
it's a
selling
discovery
skills at
call,
that
it's a
point.
sales call.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like I like to say it's all in one, right? Think of it as like on a regular day, how much free time do these you'd say high profile decision makers usually have? So I would like to say if you can't get their interest within that 10 to 15-minute mark, you're kind of losing. So you also, playing the sales role. And, if you've ever experienced any kind of, or if you have friends that do sales, you see they're kind of like running on a time clock, like not spending more than maybe 5 minutes on a call trying to convince their client. But in this case, being the person that is even able to do the work myself, I don't oversell or undersell. Tell you exactly what you like. What you hear from me is what's actually capable, would say, in terms of services that we provide. But and I like to look at it as like you have within like 10, 15 minutes to win them over, and anything after that is just relationship building.
Interesting. So in that first 10 to 15 minutes, are you trying to provide value, like solve their problems, give advice, just do basically free consulting?
Pretty much free consulting, showing them a glimpse of what they'll get if they actually go into the buy-in aspect. Like I said, you're selling yourself and you're selling the services. You want to be able to like make them feel like you would actually be a great partner. And I wouldn't say they can't do without you, but you definitely be a great asset that they want to continue with that. And it could look like at the end of the call, maybe you get a proof of concept at a very low price to start it out with to again win more trust for future projects. But at the end of the day, you're building the relationship, right?
That's interesting. So you mentioned the proof of concept. What are you trying to sell in that discovery call? Is it always going to be a proof of concept? Is it sometimes going to be something bigger, or does it just depend on that specific situation?
It depends on the specific situation. So, sometimes you may meet like profiles that, want the whole shabam. They know exactly what they want. We want 150 dashboards built in, I don't know, let's use one of my favorite BI tools today is Sigma. So they want to make a transformation from maybe Tableau to Sigma. They want 150 of them built, but they don't have the internal team to do it, X, Y, and Z. Boom, that's exactly what they want. You get to kind of quote them on that. Or they're like, hey, we want to be data driven and this is what we've thought about and X, Y, and Z. They're kind of like giving you the experimental profile you'd say, and that's where you don't want to sell them on a whole solution that's not truly fitting. Kind of want to give them a good break-in point to try out things. So that could mean, hey, let's try building out, some of your 3, 4 important dashboards and taking it from Tableau to Looker or, Tableau to Sigma or to Power BI, whatever the case may be, and at a very affordable rate to where they're not feeling like if it ended up not being the solution that they wanted, they didn't feel like they just like threw a ton of money down the drain.
So it depends on who you're working with, but it sounds like a lot of dashboard building and things like that. What are some of the other services that you might offer?
The other one is just infrastructure modernization, and what that just looks like is companies that have been using Excel for the most part. Now, everyone, if you want to be competitive, not saying you have to go big or something of that nature, but I find most of the time, they want to kind of like be more modernized by the bringing in snowflakes or Databricks. So therefore kind of providing that kind of transformation for them, spinning everything up from connecting all their data sources together, creating the pipelines for them, having it brought into one clean layer, and then massaging the data from the bronze to the silver level layer, and then you could start talking about your report building in a gold level or whatever the case may be. And then upon that, those are the guys that start from the ground zero. You start offering more of like your predictive services. But most of the time, most of the projects I've underwent was more of like, modernization of infrastructure and then modernization of their BI reporting structure, you'd say. And then those that are now the higher maturity, they'll more, want like predictive stuff. So, building your machine learning models for them.
So some people, they already have the data infrastructure, so you can start building dashboards, doing predictive
Exactly.
analytics. Other people, they don't have that, so you have to actually build the infrastructure. Who do you think should do cold outreach? Because you have a few people working for you, like that will do the implementation work. Do you think solo people should do it as well, or it's people with maybe a team of analysts or engineers that are working for them? What do you think for data consultants
I mean, I
considering
think
it?
if you're selling, you should definitely be doing it. Every time I hear the conversation of that, it always sounds like it's going to cost you a ton of money. The reality is, no. If you've ever gone to try and sell on Upwork, and you're sending proposals out to all the possible opportunities, you're doing your outreach right there. It's just a little bit made easier. It's not as cold as you would see outside the platform, but that's exactly what you're doing. You're playing the volume game. And there's also other people that are probably pitching to those profiles that you're pushing out there. At the end of the day, you're trying to sell yourself and your services. So whether you're solo or you've grown into a team, cold outreach does not start at a certain level or stop at a certain level. I see a lot of big companies today still doing cold outreach. The only difference is that they have a bigger budget for it. So maybe instead of like massaging 10,000 leads on a monthly basis, whatever, they're probably going into like 300,000 leads or whatever the case may be.
Anyone at any stage should consider cold outreach. So you said people could be doing hundreds of thousands of outreach. What volume for like your size shop? How many emails are you guys sending?
We are doing 20,000. That would be our standard, you'd say, and
Okay.
may probably increase it in the near future. But like we talked about, I'm not in the place to where I want like 50 projects a month or something of that nature. I'm okay with 5 to 10 projects a month, and if I do get extra leads that I've turned warm or whatever, I could definitely kind of like, sell it to a different vendor that wants that, or create that plug in there. But I've kind of reached the point to where I'm not too pressed on pushing. Like I'm not counting my revenue by services anymore. Like we discussed, kind of pivoting into not taking away the service side, but doing half and half in today's world.
So doing like half services, half product development.
Yes, exactly.
So I want to kind of go back to the beginning of the funnel or the whole cold outreach strategy and getting that list of contacts. Let's say someone has their ICP. Where do they actually get the emails or the LinkedIn profiles to actually start reaching out to these people?
One of the biggest one in my case is you have tools exactly like through LinkedIn. They won't give you the emails, but you have access to be able to do these kind of filters in there, and it comes at a premium, right? You'd be paying like I forgot was it 199 a month or $100 a month. So, depends on if you did the year or the monthly subscription, kind of get stuff like that. Now you are limited to the amount of people that you could contact there. So, if you're starting out, I think they give you like you could send out like 100 direct messaging through there, but that's limited. But you could go more into other platforms, like I mentioned, like Smart Leads or Apollo, or if you're not that tech savvy and you just want to kind of get someone to get it done for you. One of my starting cases was, I paid someone like $500 a month to go scrape using the ICP, as defined to go give me like, hey, I'll pay you 500 for 5,000 leads, verified leads to be specific, and then I'll send it. But what's crazy? The other part that we don't really talk about is the delivery of these. Obviously, if you do through LinkedIn, you got to kind of do cadences so you don't get flagged as being a bot, but vice versa, the same on when you're sending out these emails. Having your email verified, your typical at gmail.com would easily get blocked once you send. I think like the limit is like 200 a day or something of that nature. And you have to have certain features like set up on your Gmail that it's not a Gmail anymore. It's more, there's a good domain behind it. Those are other places that, when I look back, I was like, oh, even though I had a ton of leads to reach out to, a lot of the messages I was sending out was ending up in junk mails and stuff like that. So kind of like understanding how to prevent that is another place that I don't think too many people talk about.
Okay,
Um,
so you were talking about Sales Navigator with LinkedIn. So that
yeah,
will kind of guarantee the delivery. Well, I guess you have to be careful
limited.
about, yeah, so you
Yeah.
got 100 a month, but you also have to be careful about how rapidly you send it out because you might get flagged as a bot. So are you
No,
just
no, no, no,
sending?
no, no.
Oh,
If
go ahead.
if if you so within their platform, you could send the whole like you could finish the credit. Like they want you to finish the credit, so
Oh,
you
I
could
see. So you
buy
could
more
just like
credit.
bulk
I
message
was
a bunch of people.
there. No, they won't let you bulk message. So this is where I'm talking about. Like if you find tools, so like the Smart Leads one, like there are tools that you could integrate your LinkedIn to, and it will do the sending for you. But again, you have to be careful of the cadence that's being sent because then you don't want your LinkedIn account blocked either. Like I said, that's where when you're using these tools, it kind of gets a bit tricky because you kind of have to take the risk of playing around with it to find like what the sweet spot is. And they probably change that. On their end, they're trying to prevent that because they don't want their. Imagine you as a user that you're just being bombarded with you know every possible person that wants to sell you something. So they're doing their own due diligence to protect. But that doesn't stop us from being able to find a good way to do outreach and not abuse it, to be specific. But outside of that, like I said, there's the third party tools that you could use to be able to do that. Like I said, just being careful on how you're mass outreach into.
You're using smart leads for LinkedIn outreach, so that'll handle actually sending the message. So you don't have to
Yeah,
actually type it out
very,
yourself.
very rarely would I actually ever go do it myself. So, I like to look at it like this. When you're doing the bulk, you want it to be autonomous. As you continue to massage it, going from, let's say, in our case, like 20,000. and you're trying to get, you may have a goal. Like my goal is usually at least converting 10% would be my complete goal. It doesn't always happen.
10%
Definitely,
book a call.
yes, exactly,
Okay.
10%, and then eventually, the rest sounds. It's all about selling yourself, right? You could guarantee like people actually get you book with you, but selling it like pricing could change the whole scenario completely. But in regards to personalization, you'd see in my case, there's as much personalization that could go into bulking, but then when I start seeing some heavier engagement that didn't convert in the first round, I would take the time to, one, use data filtration and like I said, some data science skill sets within there to filter that list and, do remarketing or you could say resending. And it could be on a personal level. Maybe this time you kind of see more of like my phase within the message that's being sent, or maybe a video of services and stuff like that. That'll kind of give more trust because you want them to trust you enough to even book that 30-minute call. So
Okay.
it changes per round of outreach. 1 month could be different than the other.
So if you're trying to do 10,000 a month, you can't really use LinkedIn for that because they're going to cap you out. So you basically have to
Yeah.
do the email.
Yes, exactly. That
Go
doesn't
ahead.
stop you from starting first with on getting the leads from LinkedIn because at the end of the day, I would say my fine like if it has to get to that touch point, but the final touch point would be a personal message from me directly on LinkedIn. One, they see, I post, I talk, X, Y, and Z, but it has to, they have to have shown me a certain amount of engagement for me to say like it's even worth it for me to go that route. So now, like, they're no longer realistically cold leads. Like, they're just people that just need a little bit more convincing.
Interesting. So you'll send the emails, some percentage won't even open it, some percentage won't even get delivered. There's going to be some people who convert and click, but then there's going to be this gray area for people that kind of like clicked around. They clicked the link, but maybe they didn't book, or they're like hovering around specific areas of the heat map. And then those people, you'll actually send them a LinkedIn DM.
Exactly.
Okay,
Or
interesting.
give them a phone call.
Oh,
Just
nice.
depends. If I did scrape for their number, then
Of these 10,000 that these 10,000 emails you're sending, like what are some of the funnel metrics? Like how many are actually getting delivered, like roughly speaking, how many people are actually opening the email, how many people actually converting to
yeah.
that sales call?
So realistically, at my worst, when I didn't know about all these settings that you have to do to your email and all that, majority of my outreach emails went to junk mails or would return as not delivered or something of that nature. So, and that was for two things. Like I said, didn't have those settings on the email, and also the emails were not truly verified. There's like a bunch of systems that you could have out there to verify emails before you send them. But after that, and now my best practice, if I send out that amount, I'll usually say about like 80% of them are always delivered, and like maybe about like close to that 100% of the 80% is usually opened. In terms of now engagement, it changes drastically. I'll see some people that just jump straight to the point, and I'll see a lot of people that will actually, engage in more of like the HTML content versus your traditional just text within the email. In terms of just booked, I would usually see more like within that 10% on average, kind of getting into that book, and then the rest is just selling it. I won't really go too much in there. There's some days I'm at my best when I'm talking to these potential clients, and there's some days I'm at my worst. So I haven't really got to perfecting that craft yet, but good enough to have a decent conversions to continue trying it again.
Well, if you're doing 10%, if you're sending 10,000 and you're getting 10% to book a call, I mean, how are you doing so many calls every month?
People definitely
Oh, I see. You're not
help.
doing all the sales calls.
Remember we talked the last time we talked on pushing out tasks to other people. So I've got to where I won't call it entirely a system, but script. You could say that they'll follow through and ask specific questions here and there, and if there's ever a loss, just kind of have like a secondary call with myself, kind of coming into play. Definitely delegation plays the bigger role in there. Try to keep this meeting short. If I start seeing the lack of interest within like the first 10 minutes, keep it as blunt as possible. It's either
Mm.
you're feeling the meeting or you're not feeling the meeting, and we could definitely kind of say like, hey, let's discuss this as at a different time of where interest is there. And the other part is that I like to cut to the chase. Usually, like services that I would offer at the bare minimum would be about 10 grand, right? And those are your your POCs. But if you're kind of going more into like you already know what you want, we're kind of looking at like more of the bigger numbers, and that usually potentially scares people away because they're going to be like, oh, let me continue to shop around. You want to hold your own ground on the value that you're providing, and if they find someone else, then that's also a good thing because there's still going to be more out there. The customer is right, but you also don't want to be a people pleaser, like call a spade a spade.
Not being so soft because you're kind of setting the tone for future work and negotiation. So,
Yeah,
kind of being firm on the price and like the value that you're bringing and being confident in your ability to generate that value. I feel like we're getting a ton of questions from the chat, and we also have a lot of questions from the Discord. So, let's transition to the audience questions. And then if we have time
yeah,
at the
for
end, we'll
sure.
come back to my questions. First one is, does simply sending an email to book a consultation actually work? Do people at the VP director level really schedule a call based on unsolicited email from an unknown company?
The answer is yes. And this is validated through working at a company and also being on the outside, right? When I was working, I would get, pulled these emails kind of sent to me of like, hey, do you think this is worth like our time to book a call with? So whether it's like, taking a company that has a tool and also service hours that they want to offer, VP of X, Y, and Z would be like, hey, check this out. Do you think we should do it? Do you feel like there's work that we need to delegate out that could buy you more free time to do more R&D and cooler stuff, right? Even though a company has a whole data team, that doesn't mean like they want to do everything. Like I remember when I was working, there was like a lot of tedious tasks that I didn't even want to engage in, but if I had to, I would. So put it in that perspective. If you're bringing a solution to the problem, you do have a potential seat at the table. And like I said, it's all about when you think about like sending stuff to people that don't know you, branding plays a big role. That simple, well, I'm not say simple, like when you're creating your website, you want it to kind of speak volume. Like you don't just want that digital presence. Doesn't mean that people are, you're going to be getting a ton of visits to the website, but when you present your company in front of people, the first thing they do is they click on the link to your website and they try and find you on LinkedIn and all this, other stuff that goes beyond you and just speaking to them. And these are validation aspects. Think of just, put yourself in the shoes of like, if you clicked on an email and you just saw it was sketchy, X, Y, and Z, you kind of lose interest. You even want to open it versus actually having a true good presence, when you're doing this outreach. Having a domain, like plays a big role. Like, seeing like if I receive an email from just at gmail.com or at yahoo.com, like I'm already like just turned off from it. I consider it a scam if I don't even know the person. Versus if I see a true company domain and they're professionally picked, like, we're as humans, we're biased to perfection, like that comes our way. Also, when you open it, if it's just a text, like I kind of lose a bit of interest here and there, unless maybe I see some more things that make me feel more solidified. I think you had done something in regards to like setting up your signature. And instead of just saying Manny X Y and Z, put in a picture there, put in some actual conversion tags in there. You'd say company logo, plays that big role. Just making yourself be more official is truly effective in my opinion.
So having the company email is a big one, so people can see it's not just some Gmail or Yahoo account. They can copy the website, paste it into Google, and actually check you out. And then having a photo of you or just some company branding, so it actually looks like a legit email, not just some spam thing.
Yeah, and you don't
Uh,
have to be the biggest to do that, right?
right.
These are stuff that you could definitely do on the basic level.
What is the response rate and percentage to schedule a call look like? I think you said earlier it was about 10%.
Yeah, some months it's a bit up and some months it's a bit down. Like I said, like, you A/B test, right? Some months I'm testing new content and other months I'll just look back on historically, what's always worked and kind of stick with it. But you always want to continue to be innovative. Just realistically, what worked yesterday may not work today. This is my opinion. I first started out at Upwork, and I was very effective in the first year of my starting out. But in today's world, it's way more competitive, unfortunately. So, I had to definitely adapt. So the same thing goes into this. Like, yeah, you're doing the same system, but your audience could be changing. Maybe traditional people or maybe more modern people. Some people may not like you to come at them with like true professionalism with so many documentation and all that. It could be maybe a younger decision maker that's just like go straight to the point. Like I know that's how I am. Like if I receive emails that are, you know, sometimes a bit too long and I'll kind of lose interest. I kind of like if we could solve something quicker, I'll prefer that. So, the tone of the email changes. So again, you have to experiment on a cadence that seems appropriate to you. In my case, it's a month-to-month basis.
When you're talking about cadence, is this like how you're following up? So you'll send the initial email, and they don't respond, and then you have like a set of follow-ups. Is that what you mean?
No, but I mean, I guess we didn't even touch on that. In my case, I give it a week. First day it goes out, second day I do a nudge, give it about a day in between, and I'll do one more nudge, which technically just includes like, hey, we're still here, but maybe now is not a good time. So, well, I'll just probably add you to a subscription list, and at that point, it's your choice to unsubscribe from it or not. Which in the emails they have to make that choice very clear for them. But I like to say, remember, if you're playing the volume game, you have to kind of be numb to where there's a lot of no's because there will be a lot of no's. But with the fact that you're playing volume and not just, again, you kind of put your ICP out there, there's still quality. So if you even get like that 10% of that quality, that's still a very good thing.
How is it possible for companies to send 20,000 emails to corporate addresses when most organizations have spam filters in place? I guess this goes back to
Okay.
delivery.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot, I can't speak on it in very clear detail because, it's not a very tedious step, but it is a bit time consuming, making sure that one, Google verifies your email, number one. Um, you're not sending it from your typical Gmail domain. You've enabled your DSSs, and there's a bunch of DMTL. It's a list of things that you got to do, and it's not that you just make the email today and you can start sending out tomorrow. You got to, warm the emails up. I want to send from each of the emails that I have it set to about send. I think it's like 250 emails. So I'm not trying to push beyond what Google set the limit to for the business emails. I'm kind of in that soft spot, so I never get flagged or I never get blocked. And like I said, everything gets properly validated to where, um, you know, corporate emails have to be open for potential like opportunities. Like if they weren't able to be contacted, then they'll never be able to like, reach out to third parties and X, Y, and Z for stuff. Well, I've never seen a company that solely does everything by themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so people can reach those emails. They're
Yeah.
not blocking all the inbounds, but there are like various things you can do to make your email more legitimate, like more
Yeah.
valid. Are these like specific tools that you're using to do this for your own email?
No,
Um,
I mean, you could use tools to automatically do it, right? I mean, there's always solutions to close the gap on that. But if you're very hands-on, you could go through the steps. It's a lot of, I mean, we have GPT today. You could pretty much use that to validate a bunch of all these documents. So, I'm talking about Gmail in this case. Google has a lot of documentations on how to properly make your email validated, your wait time, and everything that they kind of have to do to say to give your email like the status of like, yeah, this is not a sketch email that should land in junk. Now, here's the other part that I found out by experience. You get too many emails that you sent out. that gets put into junk mail, even though you had all the validation X, Y, and Z automatically. In this case, I'm using Google, but there's other email providers you say, but they'll pretty much say, okay, well, that's our KPI to say that your email should be, blocked or eliminated. So you could be doing everything right. But again, now if your messaging is kind of given spam-like feel or whatever the case may be, or if it's not of value, then you don't have control of what happens to the emails that you send. They start being put into spam and X, Y, and Z. It gets blocked. So you gotta, start the whole process again. So I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it's the prettiest process, but when it works, you get that good feeling like it's worth the while.
Yeah, so Gmail or Google, they have a process. I guess it sounds like a more bureaucratic process, some paperwork that you have to like go through some hoops to get your email validated. So once you do that, then there's a much lower likelihood your emails are going to end up in junk. But if then people take the emails and put it into junk, and enough people do that, then you'll kind of lose that status and then have to
Exactly.
reapply for it.
Exactly. Well, I would say reapply, like make do I guess the check marks for your email. So you're not applying to Google. You're just taking certain things to be
Oh,
available
got it.
on your email. Yeah. But I'm saying like they do monitor it. So for example, like I remember the first time when I first, started doing the multiple domain for the email to do the outreach. And I was trying to send 1,000 because I was like, okay, I could save money by just having, 2 to 5 of these. And if I send 1,000 from each, I should be good. Within the next day, blocked because that email was not warmed up to, like, it was unusual for that email to be sending that amount. So just a lot of check marks that you have to do. But once you cross those check marks, you kind of put yourself in a good position for that. And again, to kind of go back to this question, to be able to be worried getting passed through to put your email in someone else's, to put your email in a corporate address inbox. Now, that doesn't mean that the corporate email doesn't have their system of flagging it. Like you see, like, when I was working corporate, I'll see emails that come out like they got delivered to my email, but it'll be like what does it say, out of corporation, or it
External.
flags it as external. That's the word for it. It'll flag it as external, but if it was worth for me to click on it, I would click on it, right?
You're limiting your outbound to 250 a day. Do you have multiple accounts then that you're
Exactly.
sending it out?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Jeff is asking, I'm creating an AI consulting business for local vertical market businesses. How would you go about generating a prospect list for a local outreach program? Old school networking, cold outreach, etc.
I mean, if it's local, in my opinion, I would say you should already kind of, well, one, you could use, like, if you go into Sales Navigator, you could definitely filter all the way to the city level, right? So, I'm here in Houston. I could say I only want to see businesses that fit within this certain parameters, um, and have that whole list. What I would do to be even more effective is, outside of doing the cold outreach, instead of like doing, like, a sequence, I may, the next time of trying to contact them, I may go in person just because they're so local. So again, extra work. But before I do that, I'll kind of look at, like, was the open rate who actually cared enough that didn't convert for me to take that next step to do that outreach.
So you'll basically use the same tools to get that list, but maybe you have more options. Like you can go see them in person,
Yeah,
um, and maybe the personalization could be a little bit different.
yeah, 100%.
So this one's from our Discord. I don't do cold outreach, but I'm curious how much does he manually? How much is it manual versus using AI auto outreach? So I guess how much of it is automated? How much? Where does the human come into the loop? What parts of the process are manual?
So I would say, your your time, also my time, is valuable, right? So before I would go out and actually just have to manually email each one of these people, like, it would be redundant to do that unless I know that they fit an exact profile that I'm looking for. So I already know that they have a huge interest. Maybe they had done something on my website or something of that nature that I would actually have to do, take that manual approach. or maybe I saw them at a conference and I got their card directly, I'll email them manually. So now if automation tools and AI wasn't there, then you just have to do it manually. But um, I like to say, like, if you have effective ways of solving a problem, and it's legitimate, then you do it. But everyone adds their secret sauce. Like, the tools are out there, but think about it. Anyone could generate a certain prompt and throw it into their outreach. But if you take the next step to say, okay, if I do it so many times and look at your historical data and see what works, taking that next step, that's your human outreach. You're like, okay, or that's your human touch. You're like, this worked, this didn't work, X, Y, and Z. And you start, building on what worked. That's where, in my case, where I actually put in my human touch in there. In terms of the massive outreach, like, I can't reach out to that type of audience by myself, too time consuming. But having it autonomously and being able to have the tools to do that makes it easier. My secret sauce is I just analyze the results and re-strategize based off of that.
So the human in the loop part is actually doing the analysis and picking what is actually the content of the email and the strategy, but the actual execution is all automated.
Yeah, to a certain degree. So, like I said, as you get all these results, you start picking and choosing. If I'm able to get to the funnel of where I know for a fact that if I contacted these 50 people, whether by phone or meet them and, asking them for, if they're local, saying, hey, let's go grab dinner or whatever and just have a conversation, I would do that, right? But I had to have been sure that, one, they're not wasting my time and I'm not wasting their time either.
Next one is, what's your approach when someone shows interest but ghosts after the first message?
It's part of the game, just take it with it. But, I remember when just a lot of stuff like that will happen, you kind of, and not even just only the first message, like, people go ghost after even agreeing to a price. Q4 of 2012, yeah, Q4 of 2024 was my biggest. Like, I had a lot of good substantial amount of clients that were supposed to be starting in Q4 of last year, and because of the election and uncertainty, X, Y, and Z, everyone dropped. So it's just part of the game, and you just have to be numb to it because that is very discouraging, right? But it's just part of the game when you're doing these cold outreaches. Anything can happen. Nothing's guaranteed till, the check actually hits your account.
See, what kind of branding or online presence do you focus on?
Website was my first one. I definitely invested enough into it. I went through two stages of my website. First one was a typical landing page that had everything, and then now I have more of like a multi-page. I would be honest, my website is due for an upgrade because, again, I'm watching the trend on how certain, designs and X, Y, and Z are being more effective. So, those are things to consider when you're doing your branding. You could start with a great brand today and it's doing all great. But if you're not kind of keeping up, it kind of becomes for your story. I'm pushing on LinkedIn here and there. Not too much. I tested, being a subject matter expert, posting stuff like that, and it works. And it also doesn't work. Like, I see it works for Shaw quite well. I follow a bunch of other individuals that their clients come directly from there. So it definitely worked. It hasn't worked for me, but because I see other people doing it, it's definitely within my timeline of enabling that. Just in my case, there's a lot of things that I'm doing. I'm kind of like touching touching a bunch of stuff that I haven't made the perfect time to make my LinkedIn presence there, which is why I do the massive outreach. That's what's working for me, and it's letting me be able to do other things. But yeah, in due time, hopefully LinkedIn presence will play the next big role.
Yeah, so even though you don't have a big audience, you're able to get a big volume of customers because of the cold outreach strategy that you're doing.
A lot of these things play the role in, when I reach out to new people. So let's say, like, I worked with a financial company, and there's all these other financial companies that I know I'm going to do outreach. Like, yeah, I don't have to name drop who I did service for, but I could definitely proclaim the kind of caliber that they carry and talk about. They're most likely going through similar, challenges, you'd say, and I'll use that as part of, like, my hook in my email. So, and yeah, you can make a lot of these stuff up, but at the end of the day, when you get to these conversations in person, you have to be able to really talk the talk, right? So if I said I solved X, Y, and Z for a venture capital company and another venture capital company, and it's actually true, that's happened. I solved the problem for a big VC company, and then a small one came through, and I didn't have to name drop, but they're just like, oh, well, what was the Mac? They were asking certain terminologies, and I was able to speak to it. So, again, even though my example caught their attention, everything gets validated in these like real-time calls. So testimonials play a big role. If you don't, even well, even when you have an audience, right? Like if your audience comes to you and you're not able to truly answer the questions that they want, they kind of lose that interest. So same thing on that end.
So you're sharing like the profiles, even if you're not sharing the specific names of the companies. And then it sounds like
Exactly.
you're using that to personalize the outreach.
100%. Yeah. So,
Okay.
again, I guess we've kind of talked on a huge variety, and you could definitely reach out to me, and we could talk more in general about more in detail. But when you're doing all these filters, you're not just saying, okay, feed your strategy. You get to look at what industry they work in, what are the typical other decision makers that those individuals work with, and stuff like that that you could get from LinkedIn directly, just Sales Navigator, if I'm being honest.
So this is a perfect segue to the next question. How do you balance personalization with automation and outreach? What tools or scripts do you use to scale without sounding like a robot?
I mean, we were just talking about one, right? I'm not, even though it is a large audience, I am making it personalized for the profile of the person, the industry they work. Like, it'll be redundant if I was over here saying I'm solving this problem. Granted, the skeletal is damn near the same, right? You're pulling data, you're storing it, the same thing. But the decisions that come off of the insights or data solutions, you'd say, differ. At the end of the day, they're powered by data-driven solutions, but they're still different. So when you speak their language, personalize it in that kind of form, it makes it more relatable and for someone to be willing to talk to you. Does that make sense? Like,
Using the profile, so you'll have like different segments on your outreach list, like your prospect list, and then you have a template for your outreach, but then you'll refine that template for that specific segment.
100%, yeah.
So Jeff's asking about the tool. Maybe this was from earlier part of the conversation, but I don't know, maybe like what is like your list of tools that you're using, like the main tools that you couldn't live without with your cold outreach?
Sales Navigator, that's my biggest one. Think about that. LinkedIn is where majority of professionals live, even though that these high-profile individuals may not be posting, and some may be posting, but that's the best way to be able to get in contact, like get their contact from. And you could take that and go use third-party tools like, Zoom Info, Apollo, Smartly, the list kind of goes on. But just validating that someone is real, like you could even have a filter, like, yeah, you could, see all these decision makers, but a filter could be like posted in the last 2 days or posted in the last week. And if someone's not being engaged, you could come up with a hypothesis that they're most likely not going to engage in an email. Or it could be the opposite. They just have a profile, but they do everything on emails. So, you test stuff like that. But Sales Navigator, I can't live without. If that went away, I would have to go back to traditionally paying people to go scrape for me, and validation is not entirely true. So I like my numbers of when I'm able to have a list of that caliber and have like a good, like, if it's 80% validated, I'll be happy with it. Anything kind of less than that, I kind of feel like I'm maybe wasting my time a bit.
Sales Navigator helps you get the lead list. What about the tools for actually reaching out, like sending the DM or sending the email?
Smart Lead, Apollo. There was a new one I was checking out that I may be switching to. It's somewhere on the sticky note. But Smart Lead was one of the big ones that I started with. Apollo was another good one.
What are
Can
the,
definitely
the differences between Smart Lead and Apollo?
price. I mean,
Oh,
at
okay.
this point, they're all competing with each other, and I'm not gonna say that there's a true feature difference, but user experience changes dramatically. One thing I see a lot is with smart leads, they're more innovative. I think they're, if I remember correctly, they're probably a younger company, so they take a bit more innovative way, in my opinion, in terms of their lead enrichments and stuff like that. They kind of give you an open door to give your feedback for, features that you may want. So that was one of the good advantage you'd say.
Okay,
Trying to
nice.
follow just because someone told me about it, and I was like, oh, okay, testing stuff out, and I'll definitely be testing like quite a few ones out in the near future. Like I said, there's, again, you got to adapt with time. So as time goes on, I'm seeing a lot more innovative tools out there that I may be switching to, just depending on pay for it, validate it for maybe a portion. Again, A/B testing everything, right? Whichever one gives me the best output, then I'll kind of like double down on it and maybe re-strategize in like the next quarter or something, or the next big boom of innovation. Like all these new tools I'm talking about, they're more, they started with AI. And so they kind of have a bit more wiggle room to like continue to adapt there versus old ones that didn't start like that and they're trying to implement it. So that's one good insight I could throw out there.
This will be the last question. It's a good one. Won't you run out of leads? Only limited number of clients need data and AI solutions, unlike web design, huge market. How do you avoid exhausting potential client list in such a
Let
niche?
me let me dissect. I like this question. So it says, would you not run out of leads? Only limited number of clients need data science. Going to that statement, we're in an era where being data driven is still like the goal. If you're not data driven, you kind of like fall back. And that doesn't mean that you're coming in there to, provide like your data science and AI solutions are building from ground up. Again, there are companies that have their whole data team that they've built out, and a bottleneck could be like, we've hired the best of the best, and it's still not working. We're still not getting value. The business is still not, trusting the team. And you could literally come there as a strategist and provide, specific projects that would actually, lead. Like it, it never stops. If companies are still hiring for data career individuals, there's still room. And last I checked, majority of companies are, especially healthcare is kind of being like, I'm happy to see that because for a long time, at least when I started, when I used to reach out to healthcare potential clients, the biggest one was like HIPAA compliant and all those policies. And if you don't have the tools or able to do the customization to make sure that all those requirements are followed, it was like a big bottleneck. But now, like every modern tool has kind of like checked that box off, which you see the trend now that there's a lot of healthcare trends of like AI data, like they're being more adaptive to it. But I don't think you ever run out of number of clients. What I would say is that you definitely want to play the first to get there. I kind of predict more of like pricing would be going downward as a lot more tools make it easier and faster to get to solutions, right? So that's something that I'll be more worried about. But in terms of a number of clients to reach out to, remember, like if they didn't say yes today, they will say yes tomorrow, one way or another. Not, in a bad way, but it's like, it just probably wasn't the right time. So retargeting is a big thing. So no data that you collect from your outreach should ever be thrown away. Like I keep every leads that never even opened up or had engagements. I'll, kind of go back and do some analysis on them. I'll go check their profile. Did they change companies? Whatever the case may be, and kind of like do some outreach again. Unlike web design, which has a huge market. No, I mean think about it. Web design, you have a huge market, but don't forget every new website that comes out, web analytics is needed. New websites have better, more modern web analytics than before, but there's still a lot of customization. Like I've not seen a website that is able to build um, like a predictive user journey, you'd say. And I've built like machine learning models to help with web analytics. You'd say as long as those innovation has not come there, it's you can't say just kind of append. I'll use that as an example to append to where like data is still needed. Now AI definitely will probably change the game in the amount of customization, but then you as data individuals should just be more innovative of like what you couldn't do before. Like I used to think of like NLP was like so far-fetched of like time consuming, but now like you could do a lot with how LLM has changed that. And that used to be one of the more complex like services that I never even touch, but now I could tell someone like, hey, if you're just able to get feedback from your customers, we could do a really great like sentimental analysis and kind of build like an autonomous process to kind of make decisions off of that.
You'll never run out of leads. That's a good place to end it. Well, Manny, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your expertise and giving away your secrets. Thank you guys who joined live and for all the great questions. And we'll see you guys in the next one.